The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Hello and welcome to IMP's WWE Adventures podcast on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Help the network out by leaving us a 5-star review, give a donation directly through Red Circle, and become one of the amazing community by joining the Social Suplex Discord. Link is in the description. Listen to the other top-notch shows here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, Wrestling Art of Chris Things, Trish and Sarah, Tunnel Talk, and the AEW Match Guide. My name is Matt Maher, aka Imp, and this is your quick look back at the WWE week that was. 30 minutes of talking about wrestling, eh? That's my Canada. We're talking about Survivor Series War Games from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Jumping on over to there pretty quick. And if you ever listened to one of my pay-per-view shows before, they take quite a bit of time of editing, so I try not to fluff too much at the start. I try not to get it going a bit too much at the start. Yeah, fluff wasn't the right word, was it? I've gone down that route. I said it, and my brain immediately jumped to fluffer. The intro's ruined. You know what? I don't think I'm going to find a competent transition out of that. I would lead from that to talking about Survivor Series War Games. Do you know what will get you hard? Survivor Series War Games, that'll get you going. Let's talk about that. Let's jump on over. I told you there was no good transition. No, let's go. Let's go on over to Canada and the men's War Games that main evented the show.
Oh, super kick! Super kick! Double super kick! Haluma kick by Zayn! Punk has Solo up! Looks at Reigns! Go to sleep! GTS! To set up the spear! Reigns cover! Roman King Solo! The OG Bloodline wins!
Team Solo Sikoa versus Team Roman Reigns, 5 versus 5. The Bloodline lads joined by Bronson Reed, and the Blood Boys, the original Blood Boys, joined by CM Punk. In a match that was, it was fine. It was a very WWE plunder match. Nick a term from Josh Smith. There were enjoyable things happening. It was relatively fun. Actually, you know what? I'm going to compare it to... I happen to be watching a show written by Stephen Moffat, and it's just suddenly ringing bells of sometimes it's not the smartest show in the world, even though it set up scenes to make its characters seem smart. It's not the smartest show or thing in the world. However, it's very watchable. And it can be entertaining in that way. Sometimes I don't need to have the highest form of the art. Sometimes if it's just a fun plunder, that's absolutely fine. But there is an actual bar to compare this to with AEW's party matches, especially like the Darby Allin specials, right before the main event, where suddenly a bunch of lads just come out and just have a big party plunder. Those are extremely fun. WWE, though, makes those plunders the main event and tries to wrap a serious story around it. My main critique is the biggest point of focus seemed to come after the match, and especially with a big, massive plunder match like the fact that it wasn't integrated in the match into any way. So again, it's one of the same points I keep making. They keep telling their stories outside of the matches or pausing the matches to tell the story. You can do it in the wrestling. You can tell I've watched AEW on the day of recording. One of my points were like, stop telling stories outside of the ring. You can do it in it. You're wrestling. This is fine. But for me, it's kind of shown when, for example, the Wrestle Talk image for their review for the show was all about, well, what's the promise going to be for CM Punk? That's the most interesting thing. It does hit me more and more there and then. It's like, actually, yeah, the main talking point, the main thing people on the social medias and what they were talking about, what they were thinking about, was what's his promise going to be for CM Punk. They weren't talking about the match. They talk about that secondary. Saying they weren't talking about the match is maybe a bit harsh, because that's not true. They were. But the main thing was the Punk stuff and what the road's going to be after it, rather than just soaking in the match for a moment. Because the match was plunder fun. And maybe that's a little example of what I'm talking about. It was entertaining. It was a good, fun time. But it wasn't super smart, which is, again, is fine for a plunder match. But it also didn't leave you with things within it to talk about. Like, you watch the AEW Blood and Guts matches, there will normally be things within there for you to be talking about afterwards, rather than just like the only real interesting point being the stuff that happened after the match. Like, hopefully my critique is making sense, because it is that big asterisk of, I am being critical, but I did have a fun time. Like, it was fun. I did enjoy myself. Like, when I think about what happened within the match, for me, the main points are always like just the big spots, or there's the Roman and CM Punk deciding to get the team together. But then that can now come secondary to CM Punk's thing about the "you and I owe me a favour" to Paul Heyman. Big fun spots and little things. But because it's meant to be the main serious story coming out of the show, I feel like I would be a bit more critical as well. Let's actually go through the match with a little bit of its flow. Tama Tonga started us off against Jey Uso, the main event man getting his arm waving atop the cage. I talked about the entrance because I wouldn't say much happened in their first 5 minutes. It's like a problem of the war game structure, and Blood and Guts has a little bit of this, but because they seemingly are allowed to do a bit more violence with the match, there's a bit more interest that can happen within these earlier stages. Bronson Reed, number 2 for the Bloodline, taking full advantage of that first temporary extra man. The Aussie brought a bunch of chairs with him. Jimmy Uso evened the odds, giving us a flow of the Usos showing their tag team skill. Jimmy even pulled out a whisper in the wind. Who knew he could do the flippies? Jacob Fatu third, as they hilariously teased the audacity of Tangaloa thinking he should enter the match. Like, lol, you think you're going to make a difference. Instead, Fatu got the stage to just display how awesome he is, and he is awesome. An interesting note with Punk about to step out, only for Roman to block him and allow Sami Zayn out as number 3. This was something else that seemed to get a lot of visual attention, even though it was almost where this could become very meme-worthy very quickly. But, to be fair, I did like it as this, because sometimes the Roman matches with dialogue heavy, sometimes they just explain a motivation to you. It's like, oh, you could show me that. It is alright. And this was a good example of that. Canada, unsurprisingly, were in full song for their man in Sami Zayn. Tonga Loa got to be the tables man, slowing things down to let the crowd chant for Punk. And it worked. Building that non-togetherness that's been the whole theme of Team Roman's presentation all night long. As CM Punk pushed past Roman Reigns to try and stop him again, Solo Sikoa made it a full set for the Bloodline, as we saw finishers flying high. Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed both got to fly under Sikoa's command. Also a nice sign of their ability to work together compared to the goodies. Solo locked the door so Roman couldn't get in. So Roman scaled the cage, the big star doing a big scary climb. That's meant to just be for the agile side characters. You can just walk in, Roman. Hilariously positioning to crossbody onto all 5 Bloodline lads. Paul Heyman brought Punk and Roman into line before they got together and accidentally blew up or anything. Delivered very dramatically and right on before "This is War Games" was announced. I think that's how she does it. Double Uso splash successful, but it led to Solo and Fatu battling Punk and Roman in the other ring, making those two goodies struggling to work together the focus. Accidental spear to Punk and all, setting up a spike and near fall to boot. Flowed into a flow of big pops. And this is when Bronson Reed climbed high to the platform at the top of the cage, threatened to splash onto Roman, but Punk saved Reigns and Big Reed crashed through the table. That spot finally enough to bring the two lads together and send us into the final flow. Fatu limping from an earlier spot made him weak enough for the Usos to win out and nail the 1D, before positioning the man on the table, and Jimmy Uso also gets to fly high. Yes, Jimmy, of all people. Big Uso splash and Big Brother gets to sleep for a bit. Sammy brings everyone to their feet. To be fair, I was questioning Sammy's role in the match, so this was like a much-needed beat. And then Jay and Jimmy are the ones to lift up Roman. Solo staggered to his feet, and there he was stood facing all 5 Blood Boys. Super kick, haluva kick, GTS, spear, 1, 2, 3. There was no surprise or big interference. The goodies just beat Solo up and won. The original Bloodline all hugging with Punk leaning against the cage separately. They then got his own celebration with the lad second, but kept away from Roman. A big amount of time was dedicated to after the match as Punk and Roman is dangled in front of us. Like, you like the look of this? This pairing tickle your fancy? Raising of the wands, but Punk pressed the taunt button to do his Sleepy Times taunt. Heyman and Punk hugging, the mic turned up so we could hear, "When I need the favour, I'll come ask." I feel like this was kind of similar to last year's Men's War Games, where they were built up to be doing this big, serious story. They did get a fun plunder match, and the show kind of just ends. At least with this one, there were dangling hooks of interest, like, are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? If you haven't got The Rock, then there's a little program you could do there for Roman Reigns. Or if you have got The Rock, but you're doing him versus Cody, then that is something else you could dangle. Around this time of year, like, potential WrestleMania cards are already being booked and planned. So he's just kind of dangling things in front of the audience, being like, what would you prefer? We've got all these different options. This is what we're thinking about. How do you feel about it? But the War Games match itself was like, it was fine. It was fun. You got to see big people flying from high. My main problem with it is it's pretty boring for quite a long time, and nothing really seems to happen until you get towards the closing parts of it. So you got about 15-20 minutes and nothing, which is the downside of not being able to be that violent. So we had a bit of fun with chairs after Jimmy Uso came in. I will say, it started better than the women's. When I get to the women's one, I'm not very praising of like the first flow of the women's till a certain point. I really was not having a good time with that one at the start. I had a fun time. It was a fun plunder match. If it wasn't trying to have the serious story within it too, maybe that would be absolutely fine and I'd just walk away and not really comment that much. But because it's trying to be this big serious thing, it's juxtaposed a little bit just by the silly fun plunder chaos. That seriousness kind of fades away when you're doing stuff like this. But it was a fun plunder. So I'm not on the side of people who go like, oh, it was crap, it was rubbish. It's like, no, I got to see Bronson Reed do a big splash through a table. That was fun, wasn't it? It was alright. Anyway, let's jump on over to the women's match. Speaking of, there were spots that were like, they were fun. The women's are very much in a similar vein.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Top rope! Rhea! Riptide through the table! Cover by Ripley! Rhea has pinned the world champion!
Because I will say that these plunder matches, if they're not for you, they're not really going to be adjusting them. They like how they work. They're all just going to continue to be like this. So, sorry, Josh Smith in particular. but anybody else really. If you're wondering, did they change something up this year just to kind of like see where they could take it? No. This was the exact same War Games matches that you have seen so many times. Like, they feel identical to this point at this point. So if you like these style, like, you're going to be getting this constantly every single year, it seems. It feels identical to how they've been doing it for quite a while without really much change. Team Liv Morgan versus Team Rhea Ripley. Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton and Candice LeRae versus Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Naomi, Io Sky and Bayley. Was a bit of silly fun. I did say I was expecting this match to be a bit more silly on my previous episode, and it was like, and going for fun shenanigans, and that's exactly what we got. Bayley started off for the goodies against Nia Jax, really giving the WWE Women's Champion those spots to show how much she's improved, but this first portion kinda stung. These first 5 minutes weren't anything to write home about, killed a bit of time with Bayley's gear being used as a weapon by both women, so she had like a shoulder pad spiky thing, and then just started hitting each other with it. The time ran down just in time for 2 hip attacks with her ass. Speaking of, Naomi in for Team Rhea, wearing a birthday party hat and bringing a colourful kendo stick and toilet seat into the ring. Anyway, with the men's, where I was talking about, they're trying to tell this serious, heated story, but it's somewhat juxtaposed by the silly, fun, plunder nonsense. Well, I just said the sentence of Naomi entered the ring wearing a birthday hat with a colourful kendo stick and toilet seat. The women's was another level compared to the men's. The toilet seat was put around the head of a corner sat villain and twerked upon. Toilet seat twerk was not a note I was expecting to be writing. Candice LeRae pushed past Tiffy to run in second, turning this around for the baddies and bringing a bunch of chairs into the cage. Her segment ending with a nice line so onto said chairs. And for me, it's the double of Candice LeRae and then Bianca Belair coming in, where she used the goodies advantage to bring in a whole bunch of stuff. The crowd obviously happiest for the table, but it was these two paired together which then, it felt like we were kicking into another gear with the match, where for those like first 3, it was very silly, very nonsense, and I'm like, what am I watching? What is this? That time Belair had come in and brought in all the weapons and her segment was coming to an end. It's like, no, okay, I can feel it. This match is now going in a slightly different direction. Still silly, fun plunder, but it's going in a direction that I was starting to enjoy. The first portion of this match was very silly and kind of meh, but LeRae and Belair helped shift that. Tiffany Stratton finally got her moment. More trash cans and running riot. The trash cans going into the ring with so many of them. It gets answered later on. It's not just like, why are you throwing this stuff in? It's like, no, they come back. The woman was very much over with the Canadians, helping that continued swing into this match just becoming a bit more serious. So time to swing that back. Io Sky was next and immediately went for her trash can, painted specially for her. LeRae instead met her when she'd climbed on high, nearly pulled off a really difficult sunset flip powerbomb, with Io setting up to come down the cage wall. A high difficulty rating, so no qualms with it not going quite right. The crowd still got to pop for Io doing an awesome dropkick afterwards, because she's great. Her and Tiffy made a great pairing of flippy gymnastics afterwards as well. Raquel Rodriguez booed with the table fake out. The time used to have the two baddie hosses slow things right down ahead of Ripley's big pop. The crowd chanted "We want Mammy" during those two big hosses doing their segment, so for me that's proof that it worked. The returning Ripley got a great pop and finally ignited this match into action. A wee segment of all the lasses walloping each other and the crowd went crazy for it, built up into a holy shit as it kept on going. Liv Morgan's time finally came, with everyone but Ripley down in the cage. So she went backstage, and the commentary just like, oh, what's she do? She's going to run away? Nope, she came back to grab her bat. Someone in the social suplex chat was like, it's a no DQ match, like, why did she was perfectly fine just to have that out with her. There's no reason. The reason is the pop. That is the reason. The Aussie taking her mask off for that initial reminder that Ripley's not been able to get Liv with the Riptide. War Games announced to finally be underway, and our first bit was Ripley getting that baseball bat to the stomach as the baddies held her down. During the chaotic reintroduction of the supporting characters after, Io springboarded so awesomely across the two centre ropes, entering a flow of every single beat getting a great reaction from the crowd. My favourite spot, with Io and Stratton climbing the cage on opposite sides of the rings. Trash can for Io's moonsault, swanton from Tiffy. The biggest pop coming after, we go back to the trash can, Stratton grabbing her Money in the Bank briefcase out of one of them, with both champions down. Who's she going to cash in on? Rodriguez quelled that. Like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, I'm not going to cash in on her, I'm not going to cash in on her. That was a good enough distraction for Io to fire Extinguisher, which herself was a magic trick distraction, which worked really well to hide Ripley handcuffing Raquel to the corner, so that when all the fire extinguisher smoke had gone down, there you get Raquel Rodriguez looking at Io, and she goes to go to her and can't because she's been handcuffed. Aha, distraction. Bayley and Io working together to beat up Nia brought about a little stare down between those two former Damage Control friends and WrestleMania opponents. Nia Jax, "I'm going to sit on you through a table," was averted and instead powerbombed by Naomi and Bianca, ending focus on Morgan and Ripley battling up in the top left corner over a table, and giving us a mighty Riptide in her return, through the table, and Ripley gets the pin. I felt like the crowd were maybe, towards the end of this match, maybe enjoying it more just because it was a fun plunder that wasn't trying to be serious. Like, Ripley was just sole focus on her hatred for Liv Morgan, but the match itself wasn't trying to tell a serious story. It seemed to lean into plunder nonsense in a way that fit it better. It's absolutely fine for a match to go into plunder nonsense, and I felt like it fit this match a lot more. Lose me on the start. I was not into this match for the first 5-10 minutes. However, as the match went along, especially when War Games fully began, I felt that the plunder style fit this match more, whilst for the main event I was almost expecting it to kick into a serious gear or for an angle to happen just because that's how WWE has conditioned me for their main events. I'm almost waiting for the match to get to a point where they get to the story they're actually trying to tell, which is what caught me by surprise, where the story of the match was the good teams trying to come together and eventually overcome to beat the bad guys. Like, it did work. Paul Heyman's plan did work out in the end, even if long term it might have consequences. But the women's one was a fun plunder, and then you got a big spot in the end in Ripley getting her revenge, which is really only the main soul story, really, where she got to destroy Liv Morgan, and then pinning the champion gets another title shot against her. You know how WWE works. But that was it. That was the story. It wasn't trying to do anything super serious. And I feel like that's why when this match ended, I was maybe just a bit of a better mood. When the men's one ended, I was like, it's fine. Time to go to bed. Like, I wasn't super jazzed or anything. It's like, it was fine. I still do think that part of the juxtaposition is because they paint it as such a serious and dangerous match, and we do get AEW's version, where AEW's one is violent and is dangerous, or at least it feels that way just because of the level of violence within there. Whilst WWE will paint their War Games matches as super dangerous and violent, but then you watch them and they're fun plunder matches with a big fly spot. So it's not... there is that kind of detachment from what we're told it's like and then what it's actually like. But anyway, let's talk about the rest of the show. Because I've talked about the War Games matches specifically, but for the rest of the show, it had the main problems I think that these War Games shows have had since their inception onto the... since the matches got called up onto the main roster. They've had this issue where the War Games matches get all the focus, but then the rest of the show is just kind of nothing. Then there's the Peacock era, where every single match has about 5 or 10 minutes between it with a big major hype promo package that plays during the adverts. So every promo package has also got to be a certain amount of time, because the adverts will be playing it for the free people. So you get this big promo package playing, you get your backstage segments. Also, the people who watch the adverts, I'm assuming they also got the Otis advert, Pixelated Penis Otis. I feel like that can work for WrestleMania. I'm not a fan of it, but if you've got to do it, I feel like this format kind of works with WrestleMania, where every match is built to be a big featured match. But on a show like this, where you've got your 2 big main events, then pretty much every other match on this card could be on a B-show pay-per-view, could be on television, and it wouldn't really change anything that much. Then 10-15 minutes between every match. It doesn't really work when they're not really big featured matches, and it starts to really feel like a waste of time, because it feels like a waste of time anyway. But when you're watching the matches, like, yeah, they're fine, but this could have been on TV. Like, it doesn't really feel like a pay-per-view kind of like level jump, which is going to happen over the course of the year. You're just going to have shows where the mid-card matches aren't big featured matches, nor really should they be. But the way that WWE pay-per-views are paced, they're paced for them all to be big featured matches. The 2 War Games matches are obviously the main attraction. Same comment for the Royal Rumble shows and things. But just because of the nature of having such long gaps between every single match, suddenly the mid-card really starts to drag. It became very boring. I guess just waiting for the next War Games match. So as a show overall, depends how important you find the waste of time in the middle. I wasn't interested in really anything I watched. I had fun with the triple threat. Also, I would have been absolutely fine if the triple threat wasn't on the card. I would have been absolutely fine. Give a little bit more time to maybe the men's War Games match or something, it would have been absolutely fine. I'm really not a fan of the pacing of these WWE pay-per-views. If you are thinking about checking out WWE, if you're someone listening to this, especially on the Social Suplex where we definitely lean a lot more AEW, but if you are thinking about watching WWE, my advice would be do not watch these live, watch them recorded so you can skip through whatever you want, because there is a lot of time wasting. If you watch these live, you will be waiting about for 10-15 minutes between every single match, which to start with at the start of the show, you might be like, oh, that's alright, I can go get a cup of tea, I can go and have a wee. But when it's the pre-main event, and there's a long wait for that one, and there's another long wait for the actual main event, you really start to feel it. Like your patience is what starts to wane a bit thin. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of it at all. But anyway, I feel like I'll now just jump on to the matches that were in the middle of the card. So first off was the United States Championship, LA Knight versus Shinsuke Nakamura. This was a surprise. The result generally caught me off guard. The return of the fancy Shinsuke storytelling, VTR playing, the man with a whole presentation and entrance overhaul with his wandering samurai gimmick. They had the DBAO meter out for Knight's entrance, and it didn't seem to particularly spike, so it just faded away. I think it came on and it was like 70 or 80, and it kind of just stayed around there. Knackers being a lethal striker in the WWE style seems to fit this samurai character relatively well. Like, honestly, the presentation slots together well for me. Shin's belly to back off the top looked great, booked with him dominating the majority of the match before Knight got back in and gradually flowed back in. And I'm like, I've seen this match flow before. I watched the John Cena era. I know what this is. The number of WWE main events that I watched that was this match. Sheer amount where the bad guy would dominate all of it and then he just hits his moves and win. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. However, then, the steel plating connecting the 2 rings used to deadly effect on the poor champion's head, swinging into a full surprise of a win as Shinsuke followed up with the Kinshasa. Knackers is the new WWE United States Champion. Fully caught me off guard. I just thought, here we are for a relatively normal LA Knight win. I was talking about on last week's show that I really didn't know what the point of having this on the pay-per-view at this point was. I just assumed that Shinsuke Nakamura, his character was going to be built up, so can he really lose? So I'm also expecting a nothing match. Instead, Shinsuke actually won, and there wasn't any outside bit, it wasn't any sense of the match stops, we do our spot, then we win off that. No, generally did the metal plate bit and then hit the Kinshasa and won. It's like, oh, that was a huge surprise. Of course, there's the other part of the John Cena rhythm, which is villain gets to win the first match, then he just wins the next 2. So there were multiple parts. I'm dropped the idea that we are still doing a John Cena rhythm. I'm not leaving it. This match felt so John Cena that I'm not dropping it, that we haven't. That's not what we're still doing. I remember watching his feuds. That the bad guy will get the win, but you're almost guaranteed for him to lose the next 2. That was the John Cena way. On to the mid-card match that I enjoyed the most, but maybe the strongest felt like this would have been fine on TV. Arguably a bit better suited as a TV main event. But being on pay-per-view, I already feel like my time's being wasted with the structure of the show. So, like, sure, whatever. The Intercontinental Championship, Bron Breakker versus Sheamus versus Ludwig Kaiser. Breakker's first pay-per-view defence as the main star of the match, rather than like working against someone like Sami Zayn or like Jey Uso. Working pretty well in his kinda tweener role with Shamu, the white baby face, and Kaiser, the ripped baddie. You're just showing off, Kaiser. You don't need to be that oily. You don't need to. The numbers brought a little chaos, working perfectly for Breakker's reckless wrecking ball style that they were trying to maintain for him. This really was a whole run of fun chaos. I've said before that the current WWE shows don't really need a Darby Allin style party pay-per-view match, but this was the closest we're going to get. You don't need that refresher in between matches, because in AEW the matches come so thick and fast sometimes you just need a little bit of a brain reset. You don't need that on the WWE show, because you got like 10-15 minutes of absolutely nothing in between every single match. You're already getting your brain reset, so you don't need the fun little brain re-jog match. Kaiser was the one to introduce shillelagh weaponry, the other two lads just happy to batter each other. Sheamus, having had the match won, instead got beaten with his own Irish stick. The two focusing on each other opened the door for charging spear Breakker. Kaiser took his like a champ and just disappeared from existence, Sheamus eating the pin for young Bron. I think I said a little while ago that it feels like we're getting notes for Bron Breakker to eventually turn into a babyface, but I like his current tweener role. For his character as like this chaotic, or this reckless wrecking ball, it feels pretty fitting for him to be a tweener. If they can keep this going a little while, I feel like they might want to be on something which feels pretty special. I think being a tweener like this really does help him, adds to his wrecking ball chaotic style, because you don't know who he's going to go after, and you don't know how safe he's going to be doing it. So I do quite like it. And finally, the World Heavyweight Championship, Gunther versus Damian Priest.
Oh my God! Finn Balor! Balor with a stop! Holy hell! Balor again!
Crazy to say that a Gunther match was the one I was least looking forward to on a wrestling card, especially with him as world champion. Like, congrats WWE, you did it. I didn't want to watch a Gunther match. Similar to their last match at SummerSlam, except with the reversed champion / got your number roles. Damian now the challenger, running with confidence. Priest had plenty of counters for the champion, resulting in the first powerbomb coming in a snap form and being able to be kicked out of by Gunther. Cole calling that Gunther may be looking for a Hail Mary, really painting that Priest had his number, but the Austrian kept kicking out after the big offense. A big moment to breathe after the Razor's Edge was kicked out of. Damian lowering the straps all serious from his shoulders, but nay, south of heaven for you. The worked on arm snaps on and a weak point went from orange to red damage. Priest went to fly high and was met with his downfall. A big superplex shoved off. Damian crashed to ringside. Interference time! Double stomp to the man, met with an Austrian boot for his troubles, but the champion took quick full advantage in the ring. 1, 2, 3, Gunther retains. Setting up Finn Balor versus Damian Priest. And as soon as this happened, I was just like, oh, this was exactly the flow which is fully predicted. And it almost felt like you could have done this on television. I know it's good to give Gunther a pay-per-view defence, but in watching the show, I already feel like I'm having my time wasted, and this match felt like an entire waste of my time. Not to be too critical. Don't be too damning, Matt. Like, no. I was watching this being like, none of this is even worth writing a note about. This is just existing on my television. I wasn't looking forward to it, and sometimes when you enter a match not looking forward to something, you can kind of put your expectations onto the thing that's happening and somewhat lower your enjoyment of it. But on this occasion, I'm just pretty certain it was just boring. It was boring, and then also did the exact expected spot and interference. So there's nothing memorable about this match at all. Could have been done on TV. So didn't need to exist. The show could have been shorter. Would have been all the happier for it. But that is Survivor Series, a perfectly fine show. I think that's what I said on Blue Sky. Like, it was fine. It's not, like, awful or anything. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not like, oh, these War Games matches are just trash. It's like, no, they're fun plunders. But it's also not, like, a lot to them. So I feel like a average review is perfect for it. But again, if you really love WWE-style plunders, you can have a great time. Just remember my thing of, what's the best way to actually watch the WWE pay-per-view? Certainly not live. Don't do that. Watch it after the fact and wind through all of the time wasting. Just watch what you want to watch. Anyway, Survivor Series, it was fine. It was average. That was worth, the last half hour to build up to that. Anyway, let's jump in and do a quick review of Monday Night Raw. That said, normally for the pay-per-view shows, I try and do it faster and get through Raw quickly, but there are some segments that I really want to talk about. So let's jump over to the New Day 10-year celebration, and arguably for me, the best segment WWE have done on Raw in years.
Now, you want to come back? After you watched us fight for months, after you watched us argue to the edge of the cliff and the last thing left to do was jump, now you want to come back? E, you left us.
Raw from Everett, Washington, with a brilliant segment. What a brilliant segment this was. A big night of looking back, a walk down memory lane with the big box of bootios and various merchandise from over the years on the stage and in the ring. Woods got to look out into the crowd all emotional as they chanted New Day Rocks. Big chance for E when they thanked the crowd. But what we're about to tell you is not your fault. A great way to tease a split. When you want to go big, a lovely reception for Big E's first time stepping foot into the ring for a long time. E built up the emotional talking about how New Day changed their careers and created a family bond between them, promising to serve as their manager for them both until he's cleared. Possibly the best heel turn execution WWE has done in a long time. Like, now, you want to come back now? Now you want to come back? Woods and Kofi both still in that air of just being done with the New Day. You broke your neck. So what? Like, you left us. If you truly cared about us, you would have been back a long time ago. Steve Austin broke his neck and he just came back in the next few weeks. The two lads united in their anger towards E. You're never getting cleared, so why don't you get out of this ring and back to your desk where you belong? Both just stuck in that anger and saying the nastiest things they can to him. E was still not giving up, saying that no, we can still save this. But Kofi and Woods had become united in their turn. Both of them turning heel. And that was not something I saw coming. Out of all the different aspects, I think the two leading theories were one of them turns heel and they've made it make sense with Woods, or nobody turns heel and Big E saves the day and we get a lovely New Day kind of reunion. And the manager route being teased was quite a smart way, because if he's not cleared, what do they do? It was like, oh, he could be the manager. Like, he could see them together even if they're not wrestling together. Really wasn't like the worst thing to tease. But instead, using the fact that we want that and using it against us so you can turn Woods and Kofi so villainous. I think that would be one thing. It's just because New Day is so respected and so beloved, we could boo them, but we wouldn't actually actively dislike them. This segment did all of the work to make sure that isn't the case. Absolutely masterful. Cannot recommend watching it enough, especially if you pair it with their segment from last week where Woods and Kofi were arguing backstage. Instead of E being a uniting force for all of New Day, it helped Kofi get on Woods' page, which was a direction I didn't see coming. It didn't feel like a twist. It wasn't played for like a beat or a moment or like a big pop of, oh god, he's turned heel now. It's not the take a beat, then swing the chair kind of thing. It was done way more nuanced than that. I cannot applaud it enough. Genuinely fantastic segment. Cannot wait to see what Woods and Kofi do next week with their new presentation. Are they even still the New Day? Honestly, that hardly even matters. I'm just excited to see what they do, just overall. Because this took things in a way more interesting direction than I was kind of expecting. Not that the other two directions would have been bad, but I feel like this, just because this was done so well, it immediately set up expectations of, oh, they're actually cooking something here. There's something going on. Speaking of cooking something up, what's next for CM Punk? Punkerton kicked off the show, first Raw appearance since the show after his Hell in the Cell match. He knows what the future holds, gets up on the corner and points up to the currently open space. There are multiple ways you can finish your story, insinuating that maybe that's through the Royal Rumble. Maybe it's through calling in a favour, that favour that he now has in his back pocket after War Games. Burn it down, Sethy Boo in a sparkly brown suit and fishnet long sleeve top, soaking up the crowd as they sang his song, before they hyped themselves into chanting for Punk soon after too. Seth's been thinking a lot. I really should have knocked your ass out the second you came back to WWE. Plenty of things got in the way, but it's time to rectify that. Tonight is the night I knock CM Punk on his ass. Punk showed the exact opposite level of animosity, having no interest in Seth now that he doesn't have a championship, or at least feigning no interest. I've got things to do in this business and you are not it. Seth ignited the fight and made Mr. Chicago Man care. I am the business and walloped him. Sami and Jay broke up the fight, but Seth was having none of any logic for folk who teamed with Roman, never mind CM Punk. Sami made it clear that he wanted Rollins. If he'd said yes, they never would have had to team with Punk. A great fiery back and forth reminding the audience of all the reasons both men have of being the way they are right now. It's an exposition dump, but for me that's perfectly fine given some of what they're talking about goes back over 10 years. At that point, that's okay. You're stubborn, Seth. No, you're naive and gullible and you're being stupid, Sami. Fine, let's have a match. The fire-igniting incident for Sami Zayn, though. Jay was attacked backstage in a quick segment before the ad break, amping Sami to beat up Seth even more. So the main event was Seth Rollins versus Sami Zayn. Every now and then, I'm reminded how lovely it is to have Sami as a main event talent after the years of shite Vince booking just not getting him. That said, we only had 8 minutes left at the bell, so this one had to get through the paces pretty quick. No surprise these two were a solid pairing. The first half showed how familiar each lad was with the other's offense. The second actually working off their animosity built up earlier. My issue isn't with you, Sami, it's with Punk. Sami the one angered because of the attack on Jay, losing his cool and fetching a chair. The match coming to a full stop for Rollins to deliver dialogue. If AEW is your preferred style, Monday Night Raw has no interest in trying to play that direction. It wasn't me. Did you think it could be Punk? Sami threw away the chair and Seth immediately just won with a roll-up. A pretty flat response to the pin as well. However, the crowd did get their big cheer moment. After Seth had walked up the ramp, we still had a minute left of the show. Drew McIntyre returned and claymored the Canadian to go off air. He's like, you know what? If that was the end of the show with Seth Rollins walking up the ramp after scoring that quick pinfall on Sami Zayn, like, if that is how the show went off air, I would have been pretty flat on the show. However, Drew McIntyre coming back, where suddenly you've moved Seth Rollins onto CM Punk and you got Sami Zayn moving on to Drew McIntyre, and possibly Drew McIntyre with Jay as well. I feel like that all moves characters about pretty well. I feel like everybody's in an interesting position. Builds up to the Royal Rumble through December. It feels like a pretty good structure. Even if the match itself was very much nothing. And the Seth CM Punk stuff, to be fair, felt like with everybody, it was reminding you where all the players are at, reminding you why certain characters feel about the others the way that they do, and then just pretty much getting us ready for the journey we're about to go on. Which is absolutely fine on almost like a reset after the pay-per-view. That's alright. But this Monday Night Raw itself, it was fine. It's another one where I've got a lot of other notes just because it didn't really feel like that important of a show. However, Drew McIntyre's return, awesome. The interaction between Sami Zayn and Seth Rollins, also great. Between Seth Rollins and CM Punk, also great. And the New Day celebration for me is one of the best segments they've done. 1000% watch that segment on YouTube. 100% a fantastic segment from the New Day. And solid building foundation stuff for CM Punk, Seth Rollins, and for Sami Zayn, Drew McIntyre. Even if none of it is must watch if you're a long-term viewer, the way that it just kind of it reset and guided us into these, with reminders of why characters are where they are. But as you'll find out when I read through these other notes, there's a lot of just stuff happening and moving places where it doesn't make it the most interesting show in the world, which is very often the case with Monday Night Raw. It's competent, but it's all right. You don't always finish a show feeling like you've got to watch the next one. Finn Balor caused a little friction in his stable for attacking Damian Priest at Survivor Series when they'd agreed to move on. Him saying, when everyone listens to Finn, the Judgment Day win. The women of the group, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, immediately questioned what that meant, and Liv had Dom follow the Irishman around for the night. We found out what Finn was getting at when Finn encountered Gunther backstage. He told him he should give him a title match for helping him beat Priest for a second time. The moment not going his way though, and instead resulting in poor Dom walloped in a match with the champion. Finn in the end got one over on Gunther though, with him jumping and showing Dom that's how you beat him up, that's how you do it. Speaking of Judgment Day, ahead of Liv Morgan defending her title against Io Sky at Saturday night's main event next weekend, we had a wee Judgment Day versus Damage Control tag. Rhea Ripley charged on out to interrupt the post-match lampings, clobbering Raquel as Liv hid. The numbers won out in the end as the Aussie ended up getting sent face first into the corner of the announce desk. My pre-injured face. The Women's Intercontinental Championship tournament got underway as Dakota Kai defeated Shayna Baszler and Katana Chance. This was genuinely my favourite of the triple threat so far. I thought all three brought something different to the match and they all gelled really well in this three-person format. And finally, Pete Dunne faced R-Truth in the show's pre-main event death slot, losing via roll-up as Truth continued to make him look like a chump. This character feels dead. It's like, oh, poor Pete Dunne. It felt like it wasn't quite working. And I think at the time I was saying part of that it was kind of like the match structure and booking where it never really felt like Pete Dunne was having those strong moments. Then last week he had his awful forearms punches on go. I can't remember what it was. It might not have been last week. But yeah, those awful punches. And it's like, that's not going to help you. It's really not going to help you, Pete. He's been chasing Truth around backstage since and now it's full on made to look like a chump by the comedy wrestler. It's like, no, Bruiserweight's dead. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this week. Yep, Survivor Series was absolutely okay. An average pay-per-view, depending on how much you enjoy War Games Plunders. And then Monday Night Raw did a decent job resetting and getting characters into motion. Obviously, Seth Rollins CM Punk already has a lot of heat, but Drew McIntyre Sami Zayn was a really interesting direction and swerve to end the night. So I feel like WWE are in a good place this week. I said the same for AEW after their Full Gear. So like last week I was like, for me, WWE shows didn't really emerge from the shadow of my enjoyment of Full Gear. This week, WWE had their time. Survivor Series was fun and entertaining, but it wasn't like the greatest thing in the world. It's why I'm kind of happy I'm on Blue Sky, because I don't really see the extremes anymore. It's seemingly just a much more positive place overall, or at least the critique feels more honest. I feel like that's a bigger part of it. It's the way people talk about it, because there isn't that pressure to either be like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. You can actually talk about the thing. It's like, oh, this is much more fitting to me. I can actually have a conversation. It's like, yeah, it's fine that it's not for me. That's all right. And this is why it's not for me. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. That's how people normally talk. Crazy. Anyway, I'll be back this time next week to talk about SmackDown and Monday Night Raw. And then we're straight into Saturday night's main event for the episode after that. The year very quickly coming to an end. I've generally not considered what I should do over the Christmas period in terms of like, should I pre-record like a special end of year thing? I've not been keeping track of anything I've said because of the year. Actually, I've got a huge document of all of my notes that I've written over the course of the year. But I've not been keeping a log. How many pages is it? 96. That's a lot of pages of notes. Trying to figure out my like match of the year or something like that, or segments of the year or something. Maybe that's a note for next year, actually keep a tally somewhere. Do a Rich Latin notebook or something. But anyway, I'll be back this time next week to talk about Raw and Smackers. So with that, I say thank you for listening, liking, sharing, engaging in any form, any manner. Always appreciated, never taken for granted. I'll be back this time next week to have another adventure in WWE. So with that, I bid you adieu. Adios.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, Happy Friday! Then you check your phone quickly and discover today is actually Friday. So yes, Happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.